Snake Slaying and Chasing Deer. Chapter 1 The Bloody Opening. In the 37th year of the Daifeng dynasty, war broke out again in the north. Huaizhenyu Chiwuji stood on the top of Yanmen Pass in armor, his eyes as deep as night. His armor was stained with blood stains that had not yet dried up, black and red, like a picture of hell. The soldiers behind him were panting like cows, but they still gritted their teeth and stood upright, waiting for the order of this general who had fought countless battles. The enemy has been defeated, and the rest have fled. Deputy General He Huai reported. There was still unfaded fear in his voice. Lord Ho, do you want to send light cavalry to pursue you? Chiwuji slowly raised his eyes and sneered. That smile fell in everyone's eyes, but it was colder than a blade. Chase. Just one word, but like a clarion call, igniting morale. In an instant, the iron hooves thundered. In the night sky, wolf smoke and fire reflected each other, and the heavy snow in the north was stained red with blood. Chiwuji looked into the distance, his eyes were calm, as if the slaughter was just a part of his breath. And in the capital, the news of this victory will set off another undercurrent. Chapter 2 The Court of Justice. In the imperial palace of the capital, the emperor sat upon the golden throne. Another victory at Yanmen Pass. Chiwuji has slain 70,000 enemy troops and captured 5 generals. The eunuch read the victory report aloud, his voice echoing throughout the hall. The ministers were awed. Your Highness is truly valiant and a pillar of the Daifeng state. Someone exclaimed in praise. However, there are also people who secretly sneer in their hearts. This Marquis of Huizun holds a high position and power, with hundreds of thousands of troops in the army, and his reputation is close to the court. If this continues, I am afraid that even the imperial power will be suppressed by him. Left Prime Minister Pei Huanqing stepped forward, his words gentle yet pointed. Although the Marquis has made outstanding contributions, the border troops are too numerous and may breed dissent. Your Majesty, should we order the Marquis to return to the capital and temporarily suspend his military power? The whole hall was quiet. The Emperor tapped the dragon table with his jade scepter, his face expressionless. This was the most difficult decision for an emperor. If he favored the Emperor, his authority would be limited. If he suppressed the Emperor, his army would lose morale. This matter. Let's discuss it later. The Emperor's gaze was heavy, and no one could see through it. And deep in the palace, a pair of beautiful but cold eyes quietly watched all this. It was Princess Changle, her red lips hooked lightly, and she whispered, Chiwuji. This game has just begun. Chapter 3 The Temptation of the Palace. Under the veil of night, Princess Changle hosted a banquet at Jingyang Palace. Thousands of lanterns lit the palace, and the air was thick with fragrance. Chiwuji had just returned from the border and was summoned to the palace. Princess Changle was wearing a scarlet robe, her eyebrows and eyes were charming, but she was implicitly cold. She personally poured wine for him, and her gesture was almost rude. My lord, your majesty has slain enemies thousands of miles away, and your might is known far and wide. Now that you've returned to the capital, I'm sure thousands will flock to greet you, right? Chiwuji looked at her, and a smile curled up on the corners of his lips. 10,000 people welcome? This Marquis only saw His Highness greeting me. This sentence is like a joke and like a blade. Princess Changle's heart was shocked, but she remained calm, but approached slightly, and her tone was low. What if this palace is willing to help the prince go further? This great mountain and river is not only the border and the court. In her tone, there was already a faint sense of temptation and temptation. Chiwuji remained motionless, his expression as normal as ever. He simply replied, Your Highness, if a snake wishes to swallow a dragon, it must ask heaven for its permission. The lights flickered, the two looked at each other, and the atmosphere was turbulent. Chapter 4 The Shadow of the Market. The night market in the capital was full of people. A young man in white walked among the crowd, holding a flute and looking detached. His name was Ye Qifeng, a wandering wanderer, but he had a secret connection with Chiwuji. Ye Qifeng fought with a group of men in black in the dark alley, and while the sword light was flashing, he shouted coldly, You are just spies of the Wei state, and you dare to sneak into the hinterland of Daifeng. All the men in black were cut down, leaving only one man wailing in his deathbed, Marquis Huizun. He is also a target. Ye Qifeng's face changed slightly, and he looked up at the northern night sky. Chiwuji, you are fighting for your life in the court, but they are weaving nets in the shadows. Elsewhere in the palace, Princess Changle whispered to the eunuch, if Chi Wuji refuses to submit, let the sword of the Jianghu cut his edge first. Chapter 5 Home Mansion Night Talk. Hui Zunho's mansion, the lights are not sleeping. Chi Wuji, stripped of his armor and wearing only his undergarment, sat alone in the hall. On the table lay a secret letter with the following inscription, a secret envoy from the state of Wei has come to the capital to plot something. His eyebrows and eyes were silent, but he never put down the wine cup in his hand. Suddenly, a light breeze blew, and a figure in white jumped in from the window. Chi Wuji did not panic, but raised his eyes and smiled. Ye Qifeng. You are still alive. The two looked at each other and were silent for a long time. Finally, Ye Qifeng whispered, the situation in Beijing is more dangerous than you think. Someone wants your life. Chi Wuji laughed loudly, his voice thick, in this world, there are more people who want this marquis's life. Come one, I'll kill one. However, behind the laughter, for the first time, his eyes showed a hint of uneasiness. Chapter 6 Dark Tide Whirlpool. On an autumn night in the capital, outside the palace, red clouds overwhelmed the top. The suspicions in the court hadn't dissipated with the victory, instead, they intensified with Chi Wuji's triumphant return to the capital. Left Prime Minister Pei Huangqing summoned all the court officials for a private discussion, the candlelight flickering and the room filled with shadows. The Marquis has too many troops and holds unparalleled prestige within the military. If he is allowed to continue to grow in power, I'm afraid the court will no longer be honored as the son of heaven. Pei Huangqing's tone was cold and stern, his voice low but undeniable. The Minister of War pondered, the Marquis is, after all, a pillar of the Great Feng. If he were to seize power by force, it would likely shake the morale of the border troops. That's why we need to borrow a knife. Pei Huangqing's eyes flashed. The people of the Jianghu, the barbarians, can all be used as weapons. Wait until his power diminishes, and then we can punish him. This sentence, in the cold atmosphere, like a dark sword, quietly inserted into the heart of the situation. At the same time, at the Chinnan night market, an old blind man was shaking a bronze bell and singing an ancient song in a low voice. The snake rises from the 9 rings, and the deer goes to the wasteland. Heroes enter the game, life and death are speechless. His voice echoed in the hearts of the crowd strangely, as if it was a sign of something in the dark. Chapter 7 The Princess's Chess Game. Jingyang Palace. Princess Changle sat quietly in front of the bronze mirror, and the palace maids combed her cloud hair. Her eyes were cold, her fingertips stroked the jade cup on the table, and there was a faint smile on her lips. The father and the ministers are suspicious of each other, but they don't know that there are other people who can really change the fate of Defeng. She took out a handkerchief embroidered with snake patterns, sniffed it gently, and her eyes drifted away. Chi Wuji, are you the general on my chessboard, or the prey in my heart? That night, she summoned the secret agent. Pass my message to the southwestern barbarian leaders. If you can help me weaken Chi Wuji, the palace will reward you handsomely. The spy was startled. Your Highness, this is inviting a wolf into the house. Shut up. Princess Changle's voice was as cold as ice. There are no wolves in this world, only who can tear whom apart. The wind outside the window, rustling, seemed to accompany her ambitions. Chapter 8 The Dream of the Rivers and Lakes. The night rain is gurgling, and the temple is broken on the outskirts of the city. Ye Qifeng sat quietly on the futon, the flute in his hand was placed horizontally, and his eyes were staring at the fire. Suddenly, there were footsteps outside the door. A woman in a cloak pushed the door open, carrying water vapor and cold fragrance. She calls herself Shen Wuhan and is a ranger, but she is secretly investigating a bizarre case. In recent months, many dignitaries in the capital have died suddenly for no reason, and their bodies are left with snake scale-like marks. Someone is poisoning. Shen Wuhan's tone was low, and it is related to the techniques of the Wei state. Ye Qifeng's heart was shocked. Serpentine. The pattern of Princess Changle's handkerchief came to his mind, and he vaguely felt that there was some strange connection between the two. At this moment, a dark shadow flashed outside the window. The candles went out in an instant, and the room was cold. Be careful. Ye Qifeng drew his sword and stood back to back with Shen Wuhan. The dark shadow whispered, like a snake spitting out its message, Defeng will fall, the Serpent King will return. The voice is eerie, like a dream. When the fire was lit again, the black shadow had already dissipated, leaving only a dim bronze mirror, and the mirror reflected the blood-colored snake shadow. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 9 The Secret Edict of the Dragon Case. In the early morning, the main hall court meeting. The emperor's face was haggard, but he couldn't hide the suspicion in his eyes. He looked at Chiwuji and spoke slowly, "My lord, strange phenomena have been occurring frequently in the capital tonight, and rumors are spreading. I would like to order you to return to the Marquisate temporarily, stay out of court affairs, and await deployment to the border troops." As soon as these words came out, the whole court was in an uproar. Chiwuji frowned slightly, but still clasped his fists and replied, "I obey your command." As he was leaving court, he reached the steps of the imperial court when a young eunuch suddenly thrust a scroll of secret instructions into his hand. When I unfolded it, it turned out to be the emperor's own handwriting, but the handwriting was scribbled but full of eagerness. "Marquis, quickly prepare your troops. There's unrest at court. The Serpent clan is causing trouble. Be wary of the palace." Chiwuji's heart was cold. Snake party? Wasn't the rumors that night groundless? He put away the secret edict and swept his eyes over the ministers, only to feel that behind every smiling face, there were poisonous fangs hidden. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 10 The Shadow of the Home Mansion. Late at night, the mansion was quiet, yet a strange fragrance filled the air. Chiwuji walked out of the study, noticed that his breath was wrong, and immediately pressed his sword. The lights in the courtyard flickered, and I saw a masked woman standing on the rockery, holding a slender dagger in her hand, which faintly glowed green. "People from the snake party?" Chiwuji asked in a deep voice. The woman sneered, her voice gentle and sweet, "My lord, you've slaughtered so many people that your blood and energy are rushing to your head. The poison has entered your system in an instant." Before she finished speaking, her figure had already swept down like a phantom, and the dagger was pointed directly at Chiwuji's throat. The blade's flash was instantly deflected by the iron sword, sparks flying everywhere. Chiwuji thrust out with a palm, sending the woman back 3 steps, her veil falling off. It was actually an extremely beautiful face, with eyebrows and eyes somewhat similar to Princess Changle. Chiwuji's heart was shaken, but he saw the snake pupils in the woman's eyes flickering, and she said coldly, "The blood of the Snake King will flow from you." Before she finished speaking, her figure disappeared into the night, leaving only snake scale-like fragments on the ground, which dissipated with the wind. Under the lights of the home mansion, Chiwuji held his long sword tightly, sweating profusely on his forehead. "Snake party? Is it a human, a demon, or a?" he muttered in a low voice. For the first time he felt that this chess game had gone beyond the realm of ordinary intrigue. Chapter 11 Midnight Tracking. Late at night, outside the city walls of Beijing, the cold wind was as sharp as a knife. Chiwuji held a long sword and walked side by side with Yekifeng, and the figures of the two were elongated under the light, silent and alert. She escaped quickly. The poisonous gas on the dagger is extremely difficult to detect. If it is contaminated, her whole body will be paralyzed within 10 breaths. Yekifeng reminded in a low voice. Chiwuji nodded, his eyes were like lightning, piercing the night and pointing straight to the southwest. "The snake party's hideout will not be too far from Kyoto. Tonight, we must catch her." In the night, the two stepped through the tiled houses and crossed the alleys, and the gravel streets reflected by the fire were wet with rain and reflected the cold light. Suddenly, a wisp of purple smoke rose from the roof, and the air was filled with a faint smell of burning and medicine. Chiwuji immediately became alert, performed light skills to climb onto the roof, and found that the woman's figure slid into the dense forest like a ghost. "Keep up!" he shouted lowly. Yekifeng followed closely behind, and the two of them were like hunting shadows, getting closer and closer. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 12 Confrontation in the Dense Forest. Deep in the dense forest, the moonlight shines through the gaps in the trees, reflecting on the moist ground. The snake party woman faced Chiwuji, her eyes flashed, and she sneered, "Wise on you, you are here after all." Chiwuji looked calm, and the long sword pointed at her. "Where did you come from? What is the conspiracy behind the princess?" A hint of unwillingness flashed in the woman's eyes. She pulled out the dagger, and the blade flashed with blue light. "Princess? She is just a pawn, the real master, the Snake King." Yekifeng raised his eyebrows. "Snake King? Is he a monster or a human?" The woman sneered. "People? Weird? The boundaries in your mortal eyes have long been swallowed up. Da Feng is about to die, and only the Snake King can rule the world." Before she finished speaking, she disappeared into the forest, leaving the two of them looking at each other, the night wind howling, bringing a shuddering premonition. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 13. The court is back. Indiana turmoil. The next day in court, Qi Wuji returned to Beijing, facing the eyes of the ministers, but he was as fearless as a statue. In the palace, Left Prime Minister Pei Huanqing spoke in a gentle yet pointed tone. Your Highness has been frequently traveling outside the capital recently. While military morale is stable, the censors within the court are privately discussing this, which I fear may be detrimental to state affairs. Qi Wuji replied indifferently, Your Highness, everything you do is for the benefit of the nation. If there is any criticism, I will bear the responsibility. The palace discussed in a low voice. However, Qi Wuji knew that the real crisis was not the court, but the dark web of the palace and the rivers and lakes. Just as everyone was holding their breath, the prince suddenly took a step forward and whispered to Qi Wuji, Lord, if the snake party really has magic, please be careful of the princess and her schemes. Qi Wuji's heart moved slightly, he nodded silently, and everyone saw that his face was as usual, but he had secretly planned in his heart. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 14. The conspiracy is revealed. At night, Qi Wuji returned to the Marquis mansion, where his mother and servants were already asleep. He lit the light in the study and looked closely at the snake scale fragments he had picked up last night, and cold sweat slid down the corners of his eyebrows. Each scale seems to have traces of talismans, and if you interpret them, you can know the technique and source to which they belong. The Snake King actually exists, and his power is far beyond the reach of ordinary people. Qi Wuji murmured softly. At this time, there was a faint sound outside the study window, and he looked sideways, and Ye Qifeng jumped into the room with a solemn expression. Lord Ho, I found out something amazing. Princess Changel has long been in contact with the snake party, and she has set up a snake net in the palace with the intention of luring you into the game. Qi Wuji's eyebrows and eyes were slightly cold, and he clenched his long sword. Okay, in that case, the chess game has begun. The two looked at each other silently, and in the night, the candle light flickered, reflecting countless shadows, as if hinting at the danger of the road ahead. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 15. The first appearance of blood shadows. A few days later, in the bustling city of the capital, an assassination was quietly brewing. The snake party sent several assassins, shaped like ghosts and sharp daggers, pointing directly at Qi Wuji's mansion. However, Qi Wuji had long noticed that he and Ye Qifeng set a trap. When the assassin sneaked into the alley outside the house, the ground suddenly lit up with a cold light, the trap was activated, and the blade and hidden weapon came out together, forcing the assassin to retreat. Among the assassins, a woman was pale, her eyes flashed with snake pupils, and the hidden weapon in her hand flew out of the air, but it was blocked by Qi Wuji's long sword, and the force was so strong that the entire street roared. The Snake King's pawns, the end is today. Qi Wuji shouted, closing in. The assassin, caught in a panic, whispered, Snake King. The end is near. The night sky thundered, blood and lightning intertwined, as if heaven and earth were baptizing this new rain of blood. Inside the Marquis mansion, Qi Wuji looked normal, but late at night, he began to silently break out in a cold sweat. This chess game has just begun. Chapter 16. The Fog of the Palace. In the early morning in the capital, cold fog filled the air. Princess Changel sat on the high watchtower, her eyes swept over the entire imperial city. The jade cup in her hand shook slightly, and the red wine in the cup seemed to reflect the blood-colored ambition in her heart. Qi Wuji. You think your heart can be like still water, but I have already laid out the chess game, and you have already entered my board. She gently tapped the mirror in her hand, and the mirror reflected a faint bloody light, like a snake's pupil flickering in the dark. The eunuch in the palace whispered, Your Highness, the Marquis was not injured in the assassination last night. The corners of Princess Changel's mouth raised slightly. I am neither injured nor aware of the overall situation. Tonight is his first real trial. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 17. The Wind in the Rivers and Lakes. Ye Qifeng and Shen Wuhen planned an operation in a ruined temple outside the city. The snake party is divided into two factions, one is secretly controlled by the princess, and the other is a true believer in the Snake King. Shen Wuhen's tone was solemn, and he flipped through a scroll of ancient books. The pages were yellowed and full of charms. If we want to protect the Marquis, we must first find out the core figure of the Snake King. Ye Qifeng frowned, Otherwise, no matter how strong the Marquis is, he is just a pawn to be used. Suddenly, the fire in the corner of the ruined temple flashed, and a shadow slid out, as if there was an invisible aura enveloping the audience, causing the two of them to stand on end. Lord Ho! Do you know that this chess game is not only about life and death, but also about the world? Ye Qifeng's heart was shocked, and his eyes flashed with doubt and vigilance. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 18 The Night Banquet Crisis. In the East Garden of the capital, Princess Changel held a night banquet and invited high-ranking officials from the court and the guests of the home mansion. The lights are brilliant and the piano sound is melodious, but behind every smile, there is a hidden conspiracy. Qi Wuji walked to the center of the banquet, a smile on his face, yet he remained wary of his surroundings. Beneath the table, several Serpent Clan assassins lurked, their daggers like dormant snakes, ready to strike at any moment. Princess Changel raised her wine glass and whispered softly, "My lord, since you've come, let's drink together." Qi Wuji smiled slightly, raised his glass and bumped his glass, but in an instant he noticed that the wine was slightly bitter, and a snake shadow flashed. He shouted coldly, "Who did it?" In an instant, several assassins appeared, and the banquet was suddenly chaotic. Tables and chairs overturned, candles went out, and screams and metal collisions intertwined in the night. Qi Wuji's figure was like the wind, his long sword shot like a rainbow, and the assassin fell like rain. Ye Qifeng and Shen Wuhan quickly appeared to control the situation. Princess Changel's eyes narrowed slightly, and the corners of her mouth curled up with a sneer. Yes, the Marquis is really extraordinary. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 19 The Secret Bureau of the Academy. The next day, Qi Wuji went to court and passed by the Imperial City Academy on his way. Inside, several scholars looked terrified, whispering. Last night's banquet was filled with bloodshed, yet the Marquis is safe and sound. How could the princess harbor such a ulterior motive? Qi Wuji scanned silently, a hint of chill flashing in his eyes. He entered the secret room of the academy and opened an ancient book, which turned out to be an ancient scroll recording the origin of the snake party and the art of spells. It turns out that the snake party has never really disappeared, it has only lurked in the dark for hundreds of years. He muttered softly, his fingers sliding over the traces of the charm, feeling the blood and treachery. The old scholar of the academy quietly appeared and said in a low voice, "Lord Ho, this volume has killed countless talents, if you use it carelessly, the consequences will be unpredictable." Qi Wuji stared at the scroll, and had made a decision in his heart, since the crisis is coming, it is up to this Marquis to uncover this mystery himself. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 20 The Bloody Chess Game. Late at night, on the outskirts of the capital, the undercurrent is turbulent. The main force of the snake party finally appeared, and more than a dozen assassins dressed in black with flashing snake eyes surrounded the home mansion, ready to kill them in one fell swoop. Qi Wuji stood at the gate of the mansion, his sword unsheathed in the cold light, its edge like a cold star. Ye Qifeng and Shen Wuhan stood on his left and right, laying traps and talisman barriers. Snake party, since you are coming, let you know who is the one who really controls the chess game. Qi Wuji shouted in a low voice, his voice shaking so much that the air seemed to be shaking. The first assassin stepped into the trap and was immediately struck by the thunder talisman, the snake pupils were twisted, and the screams resounded throughout the night sky. The second assassin rushed over, swinging his long sword, the sword energy in the air was fierce, and the cold light was compelling. Qi Wuji's every sword was accurate, his movements were as fast as lightning, and the blood instantly reflected all over the sky. In the home mansion, the candles were flickering, the night was like ink, thunder talismans, sword light and blood shadows were intertwined, and the entire night sky of the capital seemed to be dyed dark red. This chess game is just the beginning. Qi Wuji whispered in his heart, the cold light in his eyes was like ice, reflecting his determination and fearlessness. Chapter 21 The Snake Party is coming. In the capital before dawn, the cold wind was biting and the fog was like a veil. The vision around the home mansion reappeared, and dozens of assassins in black quietly gathered in the grass and tiled roofs. Each assassin's eyes were as cold as snake pupils, with a fierce murderous intent. Qi Wuji stood at the gate of the mansion, his sword unsheathed, his eyes frosty. Behind him stood Ye Qifeng and Shen Wuhan, the two following him like shadows, laying invisible talismans and traps. The assassin leader approached step by step, chanting a mantra in a low voice, and the air suddenly rolled, like a black tide, wanting to engulf the home mansion. Qi Wuji snorted coldly, took a step forward, swung his sword, and the sword energy was like thunder, instantly pushing the first wave of assassins back several feet. Ye Qifeng swung his sword like the wind, and the talisman paper in Shen Wuhan's hand flew, and the talisman light flickered, trapping the enemy. Blood, thunder talismans, and sword shadows intertwined into a terrifying picture, and the whole night seemed to be dyed dark red. The assassin screamed, his snake eyes flickering, but he showed no sign of retreating. It was obvious that someone was controlling him from behind. Chapter 22 The Night Labyrinth. After the assassins retreated, Qi Wuji realized there was more to the story. He, Ye Qifeng, and Shen Wuhan followed the trail along a night path, entering an ancient tunnel outside the city. Deep within the tunnel, countless lights and shadows seemed to float, winding like a maze. Here. Is it the lair of the snake party? Shen Wuhan whispered. Not only the nest, but also the surveillance Fu formation. Ye Qifeng squatted down and carefully checked the talisman. These talismans can reflect our whereabouts to the outside world. Qi Wuji's brows furrowed, he held a long sword in his hand, his eyes were like cold blades. In that case, cut off their eyes. In the depths of the maze, there was a sudden low chant, the snake shadow transformed, and there was a strange aura in the air, which made the three of them cautious step by step. This breath. It is stronger than the night banquet. Qi Wuji whispered, and the long sword pointed at the source of the sound. A masked woman slowly appeared, her figure wandering, her dagger flashing with cold light. Lord Ho, you still step into my chessboard after all. Chapter 23 Blood and shadows are intertwined. In the maze, the battle broke out instantly. Qi Wuji swung his longsword, his sword energy surging, repelling the assassin like a blade of grass. Ye Qifeng and Shen Wuhan, one on each side, blocked the retreat route. The woman swung her dagger, her figure dodging like a shadow, occasionally transforming into a serpent. A strange light burst through the air, blinding the viewer. The snake party's technique. It's more complicated than I thought. Qi Wuji whispered to himself, the long sword cut through the light and shadow, the sword energy and the talisman were intertwined, the blood light and the runes flashed at the same time, and the battlefield was as terrifying as a nightmare. The assassins fell one after another, blood staining the ground red, and the moonlight reflected it like flowing flames. The woman retreated deeper into the maze, her snake eyes flickering as she whispered, Snake King, Marquis Huizun, you will go to hell. Qi Wuji's eyes were cold, in that case, I will play with you to the end. Chapter 24 The Princess's Temptation. Princess Changel was watching the chess game in the palace. She held a jade seal in her hand, touched it with her fingertips, and sneered. Lord Ho, since you dare to step into my labyrinth, you will have to suffer the consequences. Every assassin and charm she arranged was a temptation and a trap. If he can break through all the obstacles, maybe. It is also worth my personal action. Princess Changel got up slightly, and the palace lamp illuminated her cold face. She had already calculated in her heart that if she could introduce Huizunyu into the real chess game, she would be able to control the fate of the entire Daifeng, either trampling him into the palm of her hand or forcing him to surrender. The chess game is open, the Snake King is in the dark, and the Marquis knows how to play chess. The corners of her lips curled into a sneer, and the lights flickered, reflecting her blood-colored ambitions. Chapter 25 The Chess Game Upgrades. In the depths of the labyrinth of the home mansion, the bloody battle continued. Qi Wuji approached the core of the snake party step by step, swinging his long sword, each strike making a sound like thunder breaking through the air. Ye Qifeng and Shen Wuhan coordinated with each other, and the talismans flashed, trapping the assassin in a sea of fire and light. In the end, the snake party woman appeared in the deepest part of the maze, her snake eyes shining, and she whispered, Huizunyu, what you are protecting is the mortal world, and we is the real master. Qi Wuji's eyes were solemn, his sword like a cold star. Since that's the case, I will personally cut off your path to domination. For a while, sword light, talismans, and blood shadows intertwined, and the entire maze seemed to become a bloody illusion, and the air was filled with a strange aura. This chess game. It's just beginning. Qi Wuji whispered in his heart, the cold light in his eyes was like ice, reflecting his fearless determination and killing intent. Chapter 26 The leader appears. In the depths of the maze, black shadows suddenly condensed, and a man in a black robe appeared, his snake eyes were weirder than any assassin, as if they could penetrate people's hearts. Lord Ho, I finally saw you. The man in black spoke in a low tone, with a cold breath. Chiwuji held the long sword in his hand, his expression frosty. Are you the Snake King? The man sneered, the so-called Snake King in the eyes of mortals is just my incarnation. Today, if you don't die, I will make your life worse than death. Yekifeng and Shen Wuhen stood beside Chiwuji, their faces solemn, feeling the power and treachery in each other's breath. The Snake King took a step out, the ground talisman flashed, and the entire maze seemed to come to life. Blood and black shadows were intertwined, and the air was filled with an ominous sense of oppression. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 27 Blood Rain Labyrinth. The battle broke out instantly. The Snake King's figure was like an illusion, instantly disappearing into the air, and the next moment he appeared in front of Chiwuji, the snake-shaped dagger in his hand cut through the air, bringing out a dazzling light. Chiwuji's long sword swung out, and the sword energy was like cold thunder, intertwining with the light of the dagger, producing a deafening roar. Yekifeng and Shen Wuhen each used their special skills, and the talismans flashed like thunder, trapping the assassin in light, shadow, and flames. In the depths of the labyrinth, the Snake King whispered, "This world will eventually be controlled by me, Lord Ho, can you withstand this rain of blood?" Blood-colored charms flashed from the walls, ground, and ceiling at the same time, as if the entire maze was breathing and stirring, forming a blood-colored storm. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 28 Psychological Game. In between the battles, the Snake King suddenly retreated and said coldly, "Lord Ho, does your heart really belong to the country? Or belongs to Princess Changle?" Chiwuji frowned slightly, his eyes were like cold stars, and he said coldly, "The only thing this marquis thinks about is Daifeng's safety. As for her, just a pawn." The Snake King sneered, "Mortals think they have a share of love and responsibility, but when the chess game rises to life and death, can you keep the peace in your heart?" This sentence seemed to pierce the hearts of the three of them. Yekifeng clenched the handle of the knife, Shen Wuhen's fingers trembled slightly, and they all felt oppressed. The night was like ink, and the blood-colored talismans flickered in the maze, as if the entire space was breathing. Psychological warfare and actual combat were intertwined, which was suffocating. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 29 The Battle of the Home Mansion. The Snake King launched the strongest group of assassins, and more than a dozen black-clothed assassins with strange bodies and flashing snake eyes attacked the maze at the same time. Chiwuji faced a group of enemies, and danced his sword like a dragon breaking through the air. Every sword strike was extremely precise, and the assassins fell like a tide. Yekifeng and Shen Wuhen joined forces, and the talisman and the long sword formed an interlocking line of defense. Light and shadow, blood and thunder talismans intertwined, and the maze instantly turned into a terrifying battlefield, with blood shadows crisscrossing and fires flickering. The Snake King sneered in the depths, the magic weapon in his hand transformed into a snake, and the air was like an invisible chain, wanting to restrain the actions of the three of them. "You guys will all become sacrifices in the bloody chess game." Chiwuji's eyes were cold as he approached step by step. His long sword was as sharp as an icy blade, pointing directly at the Snake King's heart with unyielding determination and murderous intent. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 30 The First Solution of the Chess Game. After a long battle, the Snake King finally retreated to the deepest part of the maze and stopped attacking for the time being. Chiwuji stood in the center of the maze, his long sword stained with blood, his breath was like ice. Yekifeng and Shen Wuhen stood on the left and right, vigilant. "Lord Ho, can you solve this chess game after all?" Shen Wuhen whispered. Chiwuji had deep eyes, clenched his long sword, and whispered to himself, "The chess game is not over, but this marquis has found the starting line." The real weakness of the Snake Party is not in their charms, but in the ambition of the manipulators. Outside the maze, the night was still the same, and the blood-colored charms flashed, as if heaven and earth were echoing the escalation of this chess game. Princess Changle looked at the lights in the distance in the palace, and the corners of her lips hooked slightly. "Lord Ho, do you think you can control the chess game? The real master has not yet appeared." Chapter 31 Border City Changes. Before dawn, the border city was in flames. The news came, the southwestern barbarians were secretly instigated by Princess Changle and the Snake Party to gather at the border of the capital, intending to induce war. Chiwuji stood in the study of the home mansion, his eyes were deep, and the long sword in his hand tapped on the table, as if he was beating the determination in his heart. This chess game is no longer just the battle of the capital, but the entire Daifeng national fortune. He muttered in a low voice. Ye Qifeng stood by the window, gazing at the distant morning mist. My lord, if we lose the battle at the border town, not only will the morale of the army be shaken, but the forces within the court will also be ready to make moves. Shen Wuhan slid his fingers over the ancient scroll charm, and his voice was cold. The snake party and the princess are secretly colluding. What they want is not just to kill you, but the entire Daifeng. Qi Wuji nodded. Then I will turn this chess game over with my own hands. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 32 Night Attack on the Barbarian Camp. At night, Qi Wuji led his elite infantry into the barbarian camp. The camp was surrounded by smoke and the soldiers were restless, unaware that death was approaching quietly. Qi Wuji whispered to the adjutant general, everything is done according to the plan, and there are no flaws. His figure moved like a ghost between the tents, his long sword unsheathed, silently slaying the night watchman. Shen Wuhan and Ye Qifeng used spells and hidden weapons to block their retreat, preventing the barbarians from calling for help. The camp was shrouded in a blood-red fog. Suddenly, a low snake's roar came from the distance, as if coming from the depths of the earth, which was creepy. The snake party has intervened again. A cold light flashed in Qi Wuji's eyes, approaching the source of the sound step by step. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 33 Traps and Betrayal. The battle at the border city intensified. Inside the capital, Princess Chang'e secretly summoned important officials and quietly arranged a chess game. Marquis Weizun believes he has everything under control, but I've laid a double trap. If the border city is lost, I can exploit the opportunity to weaken his military power. If not, the Snake Clan can encroach from the shadows. Left Prime Minister Pei Huanqing nodded slightly. Your Highness's plan is brilliant, but has the Marquis noticed? The princess smiled slightly. He thinks he is shrewd, but everything will eventually be flawed. At the same time, in the home mansion, a trusted eunuch quietly came to report and informed Qi Wuji of the movements in the palace. Qi Wuji frowned slightly. The chess game is not over. In that case, this Marquis will personally expose it. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 34 The chess game is sublimated. Qi Wuji decided to combine strategy with psychological warfare, first using a small group of elite soldiers to confuse the barbarians, and then taking the lead with hidden weapons and talismans. At night, in the courtyard of the home mansion, the fire flickered, the long sword and the talisman intertwined, and the light and shadow reflected Qi Wuji's cold face. Shen Wuhan whispered, Lord, if the Snake King and the princess make a move at the same time, this will be the most dangerous situation you will face. Qi Wuji slowly turned, his eyes as cold as ice. Since that's the case, I will use the entire world as my chessboard and challenge them for supremacy. In the courtyard's firelight, talismans flashed like thunder. The assassin fell, and blood-red talismans intertwined, illuminating the night like a crimson flame. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 35 Bloody Night Banquet. In the capital, Princess Chang'e once again held a night banquet, inviting ministers from the court and the guests of the home mansion. The lights are as bright as day, the sound of the piano is melodious, and the surface is peaceful, but there is a hidden murderous intention. Qi Wuji entered the banquet, his expression calm, his eyes cold as ice. In the center of the banquet, the princess raised her wine glass and smiled faintly, My lord, since you're here today, let's drink together. After half a glass of wine, the undercurrent of talismans surged, and the assassin suddenly appeared from the shadows with daggers and hidden weapons coming out together, like a bloody frenzy. Qi Wuji swung his sword, the sword light was like thunder, and the sound of breaking through the air was heard in the air. Ye Qifeng and Shen Wuhan supported on the left and right, and the talismans and sword light intertwined to force the assassin back. Princess Chang'e raised the corner of her mouth slightly, her eyes were cold, and she secretly observed how the chess game was progressing. Lord Ho, you think you are in control of the overall situation, but you are the real master. Has not yet appeared. In the night, the candle light flickers, reflecting everyone's cold ambition and unwillingness. Chapter 36 The undercurrent is surging. In the early morning in the capital, the wind was low, as if indicating that a storm was coming. Princess Chang'e overlooked the capital from a high tower in the imperial palace, her eyes cold. The jade cup in her hand swayed slightly, and the wine reflected a blood-red light. The chess game has reached its most critical moment, and if the Marquis is not careful, he will fall into the trap I have set. She whispered, and the eunuch beside her stood respectfully and tremblingly. The border city has changed. I have arranged for the barbarians to attack. If the lord is distracted by the court, he will be restrained. Princess Changle sneered at the corner of her mouth, thinking about how to finally control the chess game. The wind was blowing in the palace, and the undercurrent was surging, and on the side of the home mansion, Chiwoji was sitting quietly in the study, with the long sword in his hand stained with blood stains from last night. His eyes were deep, and he realized that the chess game had risen to an unprecedented crisis. Chapter 37 Bloody Battle in the Border City. At dawn, the border town was ablaze with flames. The barbarian army was approaching the city gate like a tide, and tens of thousands of soldiers were ready to fight. Chiwoji stood at the head of the city, looking coldly at the grey enemy formation in the distance, holding the long sword in his hand. The cold light reflected his face, as sharp as a blade. Soldiers, today we fight not only for the city, but for the entire world. Chiwoji shouted, his voice thunderous. Yekifeng and Shen Wuhan coordinated from left and right, raining down fire spells and hidden weapons, stopping the barbarian vanguard outside the city. However, the dark hands of the Snake King and Princess Changle also appeared, and magic charms and blood-colored light and shadow enveloped the entire battlefield, and the air was like a rain of blood. On the battlefield, sword light, charms, flames and blood shadows intertwined, the blood reflected the sky, and the soldiers fought bloody and bloody, which was creepy. Chapter 38 Double Conspiracy. Inside the city, Princess Changle and the Snake King conspired to devise a dual plot. The dark situation in the palace weakened Chiwoji's influence in the court. Lord Ho, if you can't take care of both parties today, there will be flaws. The princess whispered in the palace, ambition and sneer flashing in her eyes. Chiwoji noticed the changes in the court, frowned, and said in his heart, the chess game has risen to the whole world, and I will use the overall situation as a chessboard to reverse the world. He ordered the elite soldiers to confuse the barbarians with a small force, and used charms and traps to dominate, fighting on two fronts, and using both psychology and strategy. Chapter 39 Blood Trap. On the battlefield, Chiwoji personally led the team to sneak into the barbarian camp. His long sword broke through the air like a silver dragon, killing the enemies who came to stop him. Shen Wuhan cast a charm, flames and lightning intertwined, trapping the enemy in a bloody mist. Yekifeng's figure was like a shadow, and he quickly blocked the retreat. The Snake King and Princess Changle observed secretly and whispered, Lord Ho, you think you control the overall situation in this chess game, but the real master has not yet appeared. In the labyrinthine battlefield, the blood-colored talismans flashed, the light and shadow intertwined, and the psychological and actual combat clashed at the same time. Chapter 40 The Climax of the Chess Game. The bloody battle lasted until midnight, and the beacon fires in the border city were red in the sky, and the Snake King personally appeared and confronted the three people of the home mansion head-on with the order of Princess Changle. Chiwoji faced the Snake King, his long sword was unsheathed, the cold light was like ice, and his eyes were like frost. Since you dare to show up, this Marquis will cut off your chess path. The sword light and sword shadow intertwined, the talisman fire flickered, the blood-colored light and shadow shrouded the battlefield, the sky thundered, the ground runes rolled, and the entire border city was like a blood-colored illusion. Yekifeng and Shen Wuhan coordinated with each other and worked together precisely, forcing the Snake King and the assassin into a desperate situation. Lord Ho, your methods. It was beyond my expectations. The Snake King whispered, the snake pupils flashed with cold light, and retreated into the depths of the Fu formation. Chiwoji's eyes were like cold stars, and he secretly said in his heart, the chess game has just arrived here, and the real endgame is still ahead. In the night, the beacons of the border city and the blood-colored charms intertwined, the chess game reached its climax, and every breath on the battlefield was filled with the breath of death and intrigue. Chapter 41 The game is reversed. Chiwoji stood at the head of the city, his eyes swept over the devastated battlefield. Lord Ho, the enemy seems to have a backhand. Yekifeng reminded in a low voice. Chiwoji frowned slightly, the long sword in his hand flickering like a cold star. He said in a deep voice, since that's the case, let's counter their strategy. He ordered his elite troops to feign a retreat, luring the enemy deeper while secretly laying fire arrays and traps. Not long after, the main force of the barbarians really fell into the trap. The thunder charm and flames trapped the enemy formation in the blood-colored maze, wolf smoke and blood light intertwined, like an apocalyptic scene. The Snake King observed coldly in the dark and whispered, "Lord Ho. It's really extraordinary. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 42 The Dark Game of the Court. In the capital palace, Princess Changle sensed the chess game was unfavorable, her brow furrowed slightly. She whispered to the ministers around her, "Although the Marquis is powerful, we can still mobilize forces within the palace. We must outsmart them and not act rashly." Eunuchs and spies shuttled through the palace, transmitting messages and talismans. If the Marquis is out of balance, there will be a gap in the palace, which is the final opportunity to check and balance. The princess had fierce eyes, thinking about how to master the chess game to the last piece. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 43 The Peak of the Bloody Battle. The battle at the border town reached its climax. The barbarians and the Serpent Clan assassins joined forces, their forces surging like a tidal wave. Chiwuji stood atop the city walls, swinging his long sword. Sword energy pierced the air, lightning talismans and flames intertwined, and a blood-red glow illuminated the sky. Ye Qifeng and Shen Wuhan coordinated their movements, using talismans and hidden weapons to block the enemy's retreat. Every move was meticulously calculated. The Snake King appeared and cast the strongest talisman, light and shadow intertwined, and the entire battlefield was like a bloody maze. "Lord Ho, can you withstand the final test of this chess game?" The Snake King whispered, and the snake pupils flashed. Chiwuji's eyes were like cold stars, his long sword pointed directly at the enemy's core, and he said coldly, "This Marquis uses the world as a chessboard, and you are all pawns." Underscore 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 un. Chapter 44 Scheming Contest. In the night, the capital court and the border battlefield simultaneously engaged in psychological games. Princess Changle used talismans to secretly influence the morale of the soldiers, and at the same time secretly ordered assassins to disrupt order in various places in the capital. Chiwuji noticed and frowned. The dark situation in the palace and the war in the border city are going on at the same time, and the chess game has been fully upgraded, and both ends must be controlled at the same time. Ye Qifeng reminded in a low voice, "Lord, the cooperation between the Snake King and the princess far exceeds our expectations, and we must break its core, otherwise the overall situation will be difficult to determine." Chiwuji pondered for a moment, his eyes were like ice. "In that case, this Marquis will use his wisdom and strength to wipe out the double conspiracy." Underscore 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 un. Chapter 45 The Eve of the Final Chess Game. As the night deepened, the beacon fires in the border town gradually died down. On the top of the city wall, Chiwuji overlooked the entire bloody battlefield. The soldiers were exhausted but their fighting spirit remained undiminished. Shen Wuhan whispered beside him, "Lord Ho, tomorrow will be the final chess game between the Snake King and Princess Changle, and I am afraid it will determine the fate of the entire Daifeng." Chiwuji's gaze was deep, the long sword in his hand gleaming faintly. At this point in the game, all the pieces will reveal their true identities. This Marquis will also use his final move to reveal all the mysteries. The lights of the palace pavilion in the distance flickered, and Princess Changle smiled on her face, and an undercurrent surged, like a shadow intertwined with darkness and blood. The night was dark, the blood color and the light of the talisman were reflected, and on the eve of the end of the chess game, everyone stared with bated breath, waiting for the final outcome to come. Chapter 46 The Final Chess Game Begins. Dawn broke, a blood-red fog shrouded the border town, while the lights of the distant palace still flickered. Chiwuji stood atop the city wall, sword in hand, his gaze as cold as stars, surveying the entire chessboard. "Lord Ho, the enemy's last resort has arrived," Ye Qifeng said in a low voice, his eyes solemn. Shen Wuhan cast a spell, flames and thunder intertwined, besieging the enemy's core. At this time, the Snake King and Princess Changle appeared at the same time. The Snake King's talisman rolled, the light and shadow hovered like a snake, and Princess Changle's figure looked down on the battlefield from the high pavilion like a shadow. Her eyes were cold and cold. Chiwuji sneered, "At this point in the chess game, this Marquis will use the world as a chessboard to wipe you out." underscore 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 un. Chapter 47 Bloody Illusion. The Snake King cast the strongest talisman, and the entire border city was instantly shrouded in blood-colored light and shadow, with flames and thunder intertwining, as if the heavens and the earth were trembling. Assassins gushed out like a tide, daggers and hidden weapons flew together, and the blood-colored talismans reflected everyone's face, thrilling. Chiwuji swung his sword, its energy piercing the air like a silver dragon breaking through the clouds, slaying countless assassins, a hail of blood illuminating the sky. Yekifeng and Shen Wuhan responded to each other, their spells and swords intertwining, trapping the enemy in a maze of light and shadow. The Snake King whispered, "Lord, can you withstand this final blow?" Chiwuji's gaze was as cold as ice, and he said coldly, "Since you've come, I will slay them all with one sword." Underscore 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 un. Chapter 48 The Princess's Trick. Princess Changle whispered a spell on the high pavilion, and the jade cup swayed gently. A bloody talisman flew from the depths of the palace, echoing with the Snake King's talisman, forming a double bind. The corners of her mouth hooked slightly, and her eyes were cold. "Lord Ho, this is your last test. If you can't crack it, the chess game will become in my hands." Chiwuji noticed that the structure of the talisman was extraordinary, and cold sweat slipped down the corner of his forehead, but he still responded calmly. "In that case, this marquis will use wisdom to break the situation and slay evil with a sword." He swung his sword, and the talismans and light and shadow shattered instantly, the bloody illusion collapsed, the enemy fell into chaos, and the soldiers and assassins were out of order. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 49 The Ultimate Showdown. The Snake King and Princess Changle both appeared, approaching step by step, the blood-colored talismans rolled, and the battlefield was churning like a sea of blood. Chiwuji stepped forward, his long sword piercing the air like a cold star, pointing directly at the Snake King's chest. Thunder and fire talismans instantly intertwined, and light and shadow swirled like a giant dragon. Yekifeng and Shen Wuhan assisted left and right, fire, thunder, sword light and talismans intertwined, and the entire battlefield was like a doomsday illusion. "My lord, you will eventually understand. The chess game never truly belonged to you," the Snake King whispered, his eyes flashing coldly. Chiwuji's eyes were like frost, and he said coldly, "From now on, the chess game will be controlled by this marquis." A sword was swung, the sword energy broke through the air, the thunder talisman flame talisman exploded at the same time, the blood was like a tide, the Snake King and Princess Changle were instantly forced to retreat, and the chess game finally took a decisive turn. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 50 The chess game is closed. As dawn rose, the beacon fires in the border town gradually died down, and the blood-red mist dissipated. Chiwuji stood at the top of the city, his long sword stained with blood, his eyes deep, overlooking the entire final game of the chess game. Yekifeng and Shen Wuhan each gathered their talismans and troops. The soldiers, exhausted, cheered. The battle in the border town was finally won. In the capital palace, Princess Changle and the Snake King withdrew, the chess game over, but the two men still harbored a conspiracy, not yet completely letting go. Chiwuji thought to himself, although the chess game is over, the world is not at peace yet. In the future, we must remain cautious. The three people of the home mansion stood side by side, light and shadow intertwined, and the bloody afterglow reflected every face. At this moment, victory and wisdom blended, and the chess game finally came to a perfect end. Extra Chapter 1 Hofu Daily Life. At dawn, in the Marquis Mansion, Chiwuji was woken up early by three women. "Dad, you stayed up late to practice swordsmanship last night, why didn't you let me make you some tonic soup?" The widow was smiling, fiddling with pots and pans in her hands. The eldest sister pounced on her and complained, "Brother, the candles were burned in the study until midnight last night, you always have to take care of your family." Not to be outdone, the second sister took out the talisman paper and pen. "Dad, you should sort out these secrets of the rivers and lakes, you can't throw them away anymore." The third sister whispered on the side, her tone calm but a little majestic, "Dad, your swordsmanship is exquisite, but there is a banquet today, I hope you will restrain yourself." Chiwuji rubbed the corners of his forehead and thought, this group of women can turn my daily life into a battlefield every day. He picked up the teacup and smiled, although there is a war in the home mansion today, the daily life at home is also a small chess game. The eldest sister, second sister, third sister, and the widow laughed in unison, the sun shone in the courtyard, and the morning light in the home mansion was like gold, reflecting a rare peace and warmth. Underscore 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 un. Extra Chapter 2 Interesting Facts about the Rivers and Lakes. One day, Qi Wuji was invited to Zhejiang City to participate in a martial arts event. People in the rivers and lakes are famous and want to challenge this famous general. Lord Ho, let's compete with swords to see if you are as sharp as rumored. A young swordsman who calls himself Ghost Sword jumps onto the stage. Qi Wuji smiled slightly, the long sword was unsheathed, the sword energy was like a breeze sweeping away the fallen flowers, and the entire ring was instantly silent. The ghost sword unleashed a swift and devastating blow, but Qi Wuji precisely parried each one. His movements were as smooth as flowing water, leaving his opponent unscathed and merely forcing him back. The audience held their breath until finally, when the ghost sword was forced to the edge of the ring and knelt down helplessly. Lord Ho, you. It really lives up to its name. Qi Wuji smiled faintly, the way of the martial arts world lies not in showmanship, but in the state of mind. The audience burst into laughter, and this interesting story spread among the rivers and lakes as a good story and became an anecdote in the home mansion. Underscore 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 un. Extra Chapter 3 The Retirement of Princess Changle and the Snake King. After the war, Princess Changle and the Snake King both retreated to the Deep Palace to plan a new chess game. Although the marquee is strong, the world is so big that there is always room for us. Princess Changle whispered. The Snake King nodded, the light and shadow of the dagger in his hand flashed. The marquis may not be aware of it, we retreat, it is also a layout. The two began to secretly collect intelligence, and the dark line penetrated the rivers and lakes and the imperial court. This retreat is not only an admission of defeat, but also a foreshadowing of a bigger chess game in the future. Underscore 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 un. Extra Chapter 4 The Adventure of the Home Mansion. One day, Qi Wuji took Ye Kefeng and Shen Wuhen through the dense forest of Nanshan and met a white-haired old man holding an ancient scroll, mysterious and unpredictable. Lord Ho, your chess game has reached its peak, but there are still unsolved mysteries in the world. The old man said in a deep tone and handed the ancient scroll to Qi Wuji's hand. Qi Wuji opened the ancient scroll and suddenly found that there was a record of a combination of swordsmanship and charms that had been lost for many years. If this technique can be practiced, the rivers and lakes and the court can be shaken. Qi Wuji nodded slightly, secretly calculating in his heart that there seemed to be more challenges and adventures waiting for him in the future chess game. Underscore 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 un. Extra Chapter 5 Warmth in the Ordinary. At night, the courtyard of the home mansion was swaying with lights. Qi Wuji and the four women sat around the courtyard, chatting and laughing. The third sister played the piano, the eldest sister served tea, the second sister sorted out the talisman paper, and the widow was thinking about homely things on the side. Lord Ho, you finally put down your sword and enjoy this moment of peace with us. The widow smiled. Qi Wuji smiled slightly, his eyes were gentle, no matter how chaotic the rivers and lakes are, no matter how dangerous the court is, but with you at home, it is the most reassuring chess game for this marquis. Under the candlelight in the courtyard, the blood and charms were far away, only warmth and laughter, this was the world he really wanted to protect.